Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. It's Denise Salcedo. Our next guest today is taking us to the moon. Former NXT North American champion, $1 million champion, three-time TNA X Division champion. Ladies and gents, please welcome Trevor Lee. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Denise. I'm excited for today.
Yeah, me too. It's funny because I was rehearsing the to the moon. I'm like, I can't do it the way Trevor does it. But I was like, all right, I'm gonna go for it. But I like your shirt, man. That was the first thing I wanted to say before we
Oh,
got on
thanks.
the
Yeah, I appreciate
interview.
it. Thank you. Yeah.
So, man, I don't even know where to begin. There's so many different directions that we can kind of start off with, Trevor. But I want to start off with some of the recent stuff that you've been doing. Maple Leaf Wrestling, you got to be part of their inaugural event. I want to start there. What was the experience like?
It was very cool, and it was very awesome that I was the very first match of their, relaunch with the six-man tag. I'm trying to even think about who all was in it now because, it's already been a couple of weeks. But, yeah, just to be able to be the first match of that was so awesome. I had worked for Scott before in Impact before I went to WWE. So it was cool to be able to go back and work for him again now because, it's been, almost 5 or 6 years since that's happened. And in that time, I was able to learn so much from so many great people. So it was cool to be able to go back and to be able to just show him how much I've grown and how much I've, grown up as a person and even as a performer. So it was so much fun to be able to work with all those guys. There was so many talented guys there. And it was just a lot of great fun.
Yeah, I was going to say there was a good buzz around the show, lots of nice feedback too. So I feel like that's always a good thing, right? Whenever you get, more promotions, more wrestling promotions out there and getting, shows and putting on matches that people want to see. I think that's great. But Trevor, what has it been like for you to sort of get back out there and get back into the independent wrestling scene? I know you've sort of been hitting up a bunch of different indies. What has that been like to return?
Right. So the biggest problem that I had in the past couple of years that I was in WWE was that I just wasn't getting to work. It's hard because there's so many good talent that is there. So it's hard to like really get a spot on the show. So to be able to just do absolutely whatever I want is awesome. So since the 90 days, I've been going to all these smaller indies, and it's like exactly where I started. You know what I mean? It's the exact atmosphere, but now instead of being like the young kid that was in the locker room that thought I was better than everybody, now I'm a bit of an older adult who has a little bit of experience, and now people are looking up to. So it's cool to be able to like help these guys and to be able to just talk to these guys in a different way that they haven't really heard before and have like kind of a different approach on it. So it's cool to be able to be back and be able to do all that and to be able to actually, have the one-on-one with the fans that did get to see a little bit of the NXT run and did get to see a little bit of the stuff that I did there. So it's cool to be able to actually sit there and talk to them about it and them to be like, holy crap, man, you're really good. And it's like, oh man, it's great to be able to just have that experience again and to be able to do what I fell in love with. And that's just kind of wrestle.
That's exactly it, man. And that's the thing. So let's get right into it. I do want to talk, obviously, a whole lot about your time on NXT, WWE, everything that went down. Now, I got to tell you, I've always been a big fan of your work. Seeing you as Cameron Grimes, my favorite thing about you, and this was one of the things that I always said, was that I felt like you had so much range because even like afterwards, when you finished doing, the gimmick where you were the investor and you're the richest man in NXT, after you finished doing that, like we kind of got to see like a more serious side of you, but like through it all, I felt like we saw a lot of character range and the matches. You're always one of my favorites on NXT. So I kind of want to start there, being with WWE for several years. When you look back at your run on NXT, how do you look back at that period in your life?
It was, absolutely incredible, right? So when I first started into the NXT and it was the black and gold, I started in the breakout tournament as just Trevor Lee at the time. And it was really cool. My first match was against Shane Strickland at the time. And, the original booking, you could say, of that tournament was I was supposed to be out in the second round. But me and Strickland had such a good match that Hunter really liked that he decided to change that booking up a little bit and to advance me to the finals where I worked Jordan Miles, formerly known as ACH. So that was super cool. So then that was right around the time when, the new NXT TV deal was starting. So they were like, all right, we need new names. We need everything. We're going to launch all these new guys onto the TV show. So that was really cool because especially at that time, it was a lot of the same roster. Don't get me wrong, it was great guys that was on the roster, but it was so hard to get onto NXT at that time. They weren't really doing the whole, NXT 2.0 where there was just a flood of new talent. So it was really cool to be able to like kind of work my way onto the show there with this kind of new approach into a gimmick that I had never really done before. And then I had gotten hurt. I had to get like my knee scoping, and in that process is where I kind of came up with the whole like Cameron Grimes, to the moon like stock thing. And when we were able to come back with that and do that, it was absolutely incredible because I don't think anyone could have ever seen that direction. If you see me in PWG before all this, I don't think anyone would have ever seen that direction for Trevor Lee to ever happen. So that was absolutely cool. And then, that led into them bringing back the $1 Million Championship and then bringing back Ted, which I don't think anyone would have ever guessed as well, having Ted DiBiase in NXT, especially at that time where it was such like a work rate thing. So that's why I really drived on like trying to get that personality and character over, because at the time it was, it was the Undisputed Era. It was all these guys that were very work rate driven. So I was like, how do I stand out amongst these guys who I know that are very, very good? So that was my way of being able to get to do that. And then, as the NXT 2.0 thing happens and those guys move on, now I'm the guy that's there. They wanted to, really see a bigger, serious approach. And I think that my indie time really helped with that because at my home promotion in CWF Mid-Atlantic in Burlington, North Carolina, I was like as babyface as you could be, babyface. And in that Mid-Atlantic style, you really get to like, take your time and learn the crowds and really just like do exactly whatever you want. And then I had the beauty of traveling the world and getting to see like your Zack Sabre Juniors and your characters like that who are doing these crazy things and this English style. And I was able to just kind of like steal little pieces of that and then bring it back home and then to kind of play with it. So I think that really helped with just like being able to adjust into like any kind of real situation. And then I have the ability to just like not really care. Like once the cameras are on, like if I'm just going to make a fool out of myself, like, oh, well, like hopefully it'll work. So I think that really helped carry on that as well. I'm kind of rambling on out here, but
no, I was gonna say I love it. I was like, you're giving me so much to work with. I love it.
Yeah. And then like that also led into working with LA Knight, who I had met in Impact at the time, and we kind of initially started as like butting heads because just like our personalities, just as real life people. But then we became like real close friends and, kind of moved through that process together. And it was very cool that he then came to NXT and now we had crossed paths again. And then we were able to do that storyline and really kind of launch, the megastar LA Knight character as well. It was just so much fun. And then we moved on to NXT 2.0, and then we have all these guys coming in that, have never wrestled before, but are absolutely incredible athletes. I mean, you look at your Braun Breaker, your Trick Williams, your Tony D'Angelo. Those were all those guys that came in right at that period of the time that had no idea really about professional wrestling, but had the drive to do it. And now you see where all three of those guys that I just mentioned are right now. And I also had the help of being able to, like show these guys how to do stuff, you know what I mean? And how to have these types of matches. And now these guys have taken it and run with it and are now doing so well that it's, really awesome to see. So my overall experience with NXT was, absolutely incredible, right? Like you really couldn't ask for much more. I could have had a championship run, but hey, never say never.
Exactly. Never say never. Now, I do want to focus in on, going because you really were like black and gold era. I feel like you definitely, were there for a good amount of time for us to associate you with the black and gold era. And so when you did go into the NXT 2.0 era, you talk about bringing in these new talents. We're seeing more of the NIL guys and they sort of go off in a different direction. When you're watching the show, it's interesting because there were certain guys on the show, I would say like yourself, Ilya Dragunov, that just like really screamed black and gold era. How did you feel you fit into the NXT 2.0 world? And how did you, I guess, how did you feel about it? Because it was so different and it took people, even the fans, a while to get used to the new NXT 2.0.
Right. I think that if I would have had to initially start in the NXT 2.0, I think I would have been dead in the water, right? Because when you look at these guys, I mean, they're such freak athletes. Like, they look incredible. Um, and before that, in the black and gold, like, the athletes are, I mean, the guys that were on the show didn't necessarily look like that. So when those guys started coming in, I was like, holy crap, I got to get myself together, because now I'm competing with D1 athletes, right? As opposed to just like guys who grew up liking the business. Like, that is a different athlete. So I feel like if I wouldn't have had the background of being in the black and gold, you know what I mean, I would have been kind of dead in the water. But because I'd already kind of had that story kind of carrying into that, I think it really helped kind of carry me over into that new light of like, well, no, this guy doesn't look anything like these dudes. And it helped kind of like maybe pique a little bit of interest towards me. So yeah, it was a very interesting one for sure, because I am not a D1 athlete.
But I feel like even with that, like not being a D1 athlete, not looking like a certain type of image, I feel like aside from all of that, like you were a character that definitely got over on the show. People loved, doing To the Moon, and it was such a unique character, right? And it's so hard, right, nowadays to come up with a unique character that hasn't done before, that doesn't have a shelf life. And I felt like the Cameron Grimes investor gimmick, like it really did get over with the fans. Like, how did you feel about going in there? And I know you mentioned it briefly, but getting to work, for example, with Ted DiBiase and having the $1 Million Championship, all of the funny skits that you guys did, and just like really having this sort of outrageous character, because it really was a character that made you perform in a more larger than life type of way.
Right. It was very cool, because it seemed like no matter how ridiculous I went with it, like the better it got, right? And then there would be times too when we would be doing some of those takes, and some writers that I had never worked with before would be like, "Oh, but you didn't necessarily say this the right way," and I would be like, well, Cameron Grimes doesn't have grammar, you know what I mean? Like, Cameron Grimes didn't get over with like proper pronunciation, you know what I mean? Like, so like kind of having that little bit of like not necessarily doing, I mean, being right made it better. And I think that was such a benefit of standing out from everyone else, because everyone else was so proper and so professional, that the more outrageous I was with it, it seemed like the better it went with. So it was really cool. And then, at some point you do got to kind of pull that back, and you do got to kind of be a serious character, because unless you're R-Truth, you know what I mean? Like, R-Truth has gotten away with it for so long because he's so good at it. But for like a younger character, I feel like it's hard to keep that type of outrageous personality and also have like legitimacy on top of that. So it was like this fine balance of trying to figure out, how do we continue to do this outrageousness and have that kind of like old school kind of promo feel, but still being like a serious and what's the word I'm looking for? Like believable competitor.
Yeah, someone that you can buy. Exactly. But
Right.
I do feel, I personally do feel like the Cameron Grimes character in that sense, with the investor, with the stock, I really did feel like you could buy it because of the way that it was sort of presented on television. And when you started making this change, I thought, oh my God, what is happening? Like, I've gotten so used to this person, this outrageous character that I loved on the show. Was it hard for you to detach from that and change your personality, change your character on the show? Or was it something that you personally wanted to do?
Yeah, it wasn't hard really for me at all, because my genuine story, like just like my real life story, I feel like is such a true babyface story. So in that transition of Cameron Grimes becoming kind of serious, we kind of really delved in on like the storyline of my father and stuff. So like that was, very real stuff to me. So I'm a very method kind of worker as well. So when I was being super outrageous, like I would be like that in the locker room, like just over the top with everybody, just cracking jokes all day. But when it was time to do those serious things, like, I would really think about the moments that had gotten me to that moment, And like just kind of talking about it now, like I'll tear up because truly, you know what I mean, I've been through a lot to get to these moments. And you know, I want to say it's hard coming from Cameron, North Carolina, but Cameron, North Carolina as an area that produced the Hardy Boys, right? So it's like, well, it can't be that hard to make it out of Cameron, North Carolina, but it really, really is. Like, it's the middle of nowhere. And yes, I had like those connections, but I truly worked my way to those moments. So when they were telling me, like, if you begin this serious drive, you know what I mean, we can push you into a more, you know what I mean, higher predominant role. That's all I ever wanted. And like the To the Moon was like the funny, like, like the stocks are, they're going to the moon, but it also had this other kind of meaning where I truly believed that I should have been at the top of the roster. So when I said like to the moon, I like, theoretically, I meant like put a rocket in my butt and launch me to the top of the card, because, you know what I mean, I'm showing that, and you said it at the beginning of this interview, that I can hit any range that you want, and all I want is to do this. So if you want me to do that, I'm going to give you the best of my ability to make that work, right?
No, I see it. That was the thing that I loved about it, was like this double meaning of to the moon, and everyone's like strap him to the moon. All of that. We'll get to, you being drafted in just a second, but I
Yeah.
do want to talk about sort of the difference, because you did get to work under Triple H's NXT and under Shawn Michaels' NXT, and two totally different people with different visions, and we've seen that on television. How different was it for you working under Triple H in NXT specifically, and then Shawn Michaels?
Uh, it it's weird because with Hunter, when he was in charge of NXT, it was a very different model of how NXT was done. If you remember at the time, they would do like the TV tapings at Full Sail. So they would do maybe like 3 or 4 episodes in one taping, and then you wouldn't see Hunter for another couple weeks until we would do the next set of tapings. So you would get less one-on-one time with Hunter. Now, Hunter and Shawn kind of have like the same kind of brain waves, right? Because they've worked together for so long, and like, I mean, they've just kind of been in this whole process together. But the beauty of like having Shawn there was that you were in class with Shawn Monday through Friday, and you would do your skull sessions, which are watching the matches together. So you would get a lot of time with Shawn, and then we were doing the television every single week as well. So now you're getting that feedback immediately every single week. And when you're doing the multiple tapings in one episode, things can get lost, right? Because there's so much things going on. So like, it's way easier to get direct, immediate feedback immediately off of just one appearance, right? Like one TV taping. I mean, we're not breaking down 3 different episodes. It's just immediate. So I wouldn't say like, one was better than the other or anything. It's just we had a lot more time with Shawn than we did with Hunter. And then, once Hunter picked up the role of doing everything, right, then it was even harder to kind of communicate. But no, I loved having both of the experiences with both of them. And right at the end of the Hunters one is when he started to mention too, wanting to turn the Cameron Grimes character more serious. So then it was just kind of like transitioning from that into now the new thing. And, it was always so much fun.
It's kind of cool, hearing this perspective, because hearing that, Shawn Michaels is so involved with the talent, it just goes to show that he knows everybody. He knows everybody there. There's so many different faces that we see constantly in NXT. And so I think that's a good thing, because if you really know your talent and you see what you've been doing, you can have a better eye for what they're going to do on the show. And I think that has been like a real big positive for NXT. For you, when you think back to your NXT time period, I know you mentioned obviously your stuff with LA Knights, but who are some of your favorite matches, moments that you look back on and you're like, yes, I really love that this happened? Obviously,
Right.
NXT North American champion, like all of that.
Yeah. That whole run was fun with, Carmelo Anthony and Trick at the time. That was when Trick just really started kind of debuting. So it was cool to see like the crowd kind of start to turn towards Trick and start to like turn him into the character that he is, so that was really cool. And then Solo Sequoia, like his first stuff was, in that program as well. So that was so much fun being able to work with him. Uh, there was a triple threat match I had one time. It was me, Axiom, and Roderick Strong. That was a lot of fun. And then even back in the black and gold days, like I was such a Finn Balor fan. So then I got to do kind of a little bit of an angle with him in that during the COVID time. So that was really cool. I really enjoyed my stuff with Damian Priest at the time and the black and gold stuff. Like it was really cool how, like everything just kind of led to something else. And then the Dexter Loomis, like the Halloween, Halloween House of Horrors.
Oh, the Halloween House of Horrors. Yes.
Yeah, there's so many H's. That's why it was hard to remember.
You're like, just a tongue twister.
Right. And then that one was really cool because Hunter was really hands-on with that one. And that was the one where it was, it was like full cinematic. And that it was just so cool to be able to do that whole process of that. So like that one's always fun to go back and watch because it was just so absolutely ridiculous. And again, if you go back to my beginning stuff in PWG where I was having these like work rate hard matches, and then to see that, it's just the complete opposite, right? And then like all those skits with like LA Knight with the golfing and the Butler stuff, like, just such a completely different dramatic change that, I never could have planned for. But I was just so happy to be able to partake in.
Yes, I was to say, hey, you get what you do it, you make what you get, right? And you do it and you try to maximize it and try to do the best that you can. And I think you definitely knocked it out of the park there. Like so many of the matches that you mentioned and feuds, like all of those things were so entertaining to watch. I do want to ask you in regards to like the talent right now in NXT, because you got to work with the best, right? You got to work with some people that are now on the main roster and then people that are, sort of thriving right now in NXT. You got the best of both worlds, I feel. Who are some of the talents that you see right now on NXT where you're like, man, I saw this person when they first came in. I love what they're doing right now, seeing the growth of them. Who are some of your favorites?
Right. So like, Tony D'Angelo, he's still one of the guys that's down there that, I saw the very first practice match that he did. So it's cool to see him growing into this character and this family and like being able to not only support just himself in this atmosphere, but also three other talents as well off of an idea that ultimately he brought to the table. So that's really cool. Andre Chase, from North Carolina, I grew up watching him and his brother have the craziest tag matches of all time. And then now he's, got the Chase U thing and the same example as Tony D, where he's supporting multiple other characters off of one idea. And you really got to appreciate that type of stuff. And then every single one of the females that are down there are absolutely incredible. I guess it has something to do with like a gymnastics background or something. I imagine that does help.
Yeah, a lot of them have it.
And it's wild to see how quickly and how fast, or I just said the same thing twice, but how good they've become in such a short amount of time. And let's see here. We got, Trick, of course, is just controlling everything. Obi was such a character that out of left field that just became such like a monster that you're like, oh man, like this guy scares me. And then when you see his matches, everything is so believable that you're like, okay, well, this guy's going to have a great future here. Right. I'm sure, there's other guys I could think of off the top of my name, but I'll sit here and talk for another 30 minutes just about the NXT product.
No, I was going to say, well, there's a lot of people, and especially when you know them and you've seen them, you've seen where they got started. I feel like that's the beauty of NXT is getting to see people from like their day one to, day 100 or whatever, right? You get to see that growth from point A to point B. And that's been some of my favorite. I think that's the most rewarding part of watching NXT. So let's go ahead and get into you being drafted to SmackDown. So you get drafted, man, obviously that's the goal. That's what everybody wants, to get drafted over to Raw and SmackDown for it to happen. Finally happens for you. You get drafted to SmackDown. What was your reaction when you finally got drafted after having been in NXT for quite a bit of time?
Right. It was absolutely incredible. And, I was kind of rotating off of NXT TV for a few months before the draft had happened, with the Joe Gacy storyline. So I was just kind of like waiting and like the idea was there that I was going to go up. But it was, how do we introduce you? How do we get it to work? So then, it was a few months waiting. And then they said, okay, well, the draft's coming up. And it's like, okay, well, you might be in it. And so there was never a guarantee until like the night of the draft when I saw it come up on the thing. And, I was Mr. Irrelevant, right? Like the last person of the draft. So like I didn't even think it was going to happen. And then finally, like the last few minutes of the show, I finally see it. And I was like, holy crap, man, this is awesome. Like it's finally happening. It was really cool. So I was, full of energy, ready, excited to go up.
I know. I feel like during that time, a lot of people had been like sort of anticipating, like, hey, when is Cameron Grimes going to go to the main roster? When is he going to go? And then it finally happens, and you're like, yes, it's finally happening. So you go to SmackDown, and things they work out very differently, right? I think a lot of people were expecting you to go right in there, have some sort of story, because I think that's everybody's idea, is that if someone gets drafted, it's because there's a plan set in motion. Like it feels like there's a reason, a purpose for that person to get drafted. And you were in matches here sporadically here and there, and then unfortunately released. So I do want to talk about that period when you're in SmackDown and you're sort of, I'm assuming, waiting for some creative, waiting for something to really get going. What was going on behind the scenes? What did you know? What didn't you know about your status on SmackDown?
Right. So, at the very beginning when I got drafted there was still kind of a power struggle happening. Vince was gone, but he wasn't gone. And Hunter was in charge, but he wasn't fully in charge. So, what I would know is that like I would be on the script, and then it would go to Vince and he would change the script. And I don't think he really liked NXT guys, right? So the changes that would always happen would be me being taken off the show. So that happened for a couple months until finally Vince was completely gone, and now Hunter was in charge. And then it became well, now how do we reintroduce this guy who hasn't been on TV for a few months and hasn't really done much? How do we reintroduce him back into a show that is so hot at the moment? If you look at that time period, we were building to WrestleMania. I can't even think of the number, but the WrestleMania where Sammy and Kevin wrestled the
39.
Usos. Right. So like we're building to all this huge stuff, and this huge, like we're getting into the massive bloodline angle, and we're on a 2-hour show. So when there's an hour promo promoting the hottest angle in the company, you know what I mean? Like, and then you got to get also, you got to get the females on the show. You got to get the other stars on the show. So it's hard to get that spot when you're trying to figure out like, well, what do we do? So I would, I pitched a bunch of different ideas because it just drove me crazy, honestly. And a lot of people, you'll hear throughout like the business, like, oh, you're getting paid, don't you just shut up? But like that's not what I fell in love with. Like I wanted to wrestle, so I would annoy the hell out of the writers and just try to pitch ideas and try to like figure something out. And they have a very stressful job as well. The writers trying to figure out everything and write everything. They're getting it from every direction. So it doesn't help when I'm asking to work every single week, right? So it was just hard. It's very hard, and it should be. It's WWE. It's the top of the top. It's the best of the best. And when you're fighting for a 2-hour time slot, like you have to get those spots, and when you get them, you got to take full advantage of them. And I don't think that I fully took advantage of maybe the moments that I could have taken advantage of. But that's something that ultimately helps the story as well. And now we live in the age where everything is on the internet. Everything can be seen. So if someone leaves, you can still follow that person's story, right? So I'm taking this now as like, hopefully it's building my story and helping that, like I said at the beginning, like my true babyface story, to where if I get that moment again, I take full advantage of it and people really appreciate it.
So, clearly, like I said, the goal is to go to the main roster. And the reason for that is if you want to have your big WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, SummerSlam, all of those big moments are going to come from being on the main roster. Like you sign up to be a WWE superstar because those are the end goals. Those are the things you want to do. So when you're not on television, that's, getting further and further. So obviously saying that it drove you crazy, I 100% get it, because the point is you want to be somebody on the show. And so when you're pitching these ideas and then you're getting taken off of the card, all of that, what is being said to you? Are there any like reassuring words? I know it's kind of silly to
Yeah,
say
yeah,
reassuring words, but
yeah,
what's being said to you?
yeah. I've always had kind of reassuring words, and like I try to be very humble when I do these interviews and when I talk to everyone. But all the best wrestlers in the world know how good I am, and that helps carry on, right? Like when I have those feelings of like, well, I haven't been used in a year, right? And like maybe I'm not as good as I could be. And then I have the best wrestlers in the world telling me, man, you're really good. And we know you're good. We just wish you could get the chance. Like that helps keep me going, right? So I was getting all the reassuring stuff from everyone, from Hunter, from everyone. And they're telling me like they know how good I am, but it's just trying to find that spot, right? Trying to find that moment. And when you're a business that is uh, whatever multi-billion dollar conglomeration, right? Like you have to make those things where when it comes time to show the all the spreadsheets and stuff of all the budgets and stuff, like you have to make those cuts. And when I have 9 matches in 2 years, uh, you have to, you know what I mean? You have to consolidate that. So like I understood that, and having the stock gimmick helped teach me that, helped kind of teach me like how business really works. So like I was aware that it was going to happen, but like I said, everyone was telling me that I was okay and that I was good and I'd be fine. Um, and they were right. I do believe that I'm going to be okay and I'm going to be fine. And I do believe that I will be back in WWE. Because like if you see now, like all of our top talents, they're in their mid 40s, and you know, to be honest, right? And I'm talking to you today at 31 years old. I've been doing this now going into my 17th year as a professional wrestler. Um, and in the past couple of years, I've been extremely healthy, right? Because I haven't been working, right? So I've used that time to get my body better, continue to stay healthy, so that in 15 years, if it takes 15 years to get that opportunity, my body and mind and everything will be ready for that. So I mean, you know, I mean, it's still exciting.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's so many different possibilities, and we've seen so many people return to WWE when they were gone, they were released, or whatever it is happened. All of a sudden, they come back. And here's my question: when you were in SmackDown, did you ever maybe pitch an idea to go back to NXT? Because we've seen that too. We've seen guys that maybe didn't work out in the main roster, but hey, you maybe go back to NXT and get a little bit more of a spotlight.
I didn't, because at the time, there wasn't anything super new at NXT at the time. You know, like the Obies and stuff, like they weren't really, they were just kind of starting the stuff, right? So I didn't necessarily pitch anything to go back to NXT because I felt like I'd kind of worked with the guys that were down there already, right? So like it would have been just kind of going back to repeat stuff. So like I never did mention anything, and I probably should have, right? But yeah, I just felt like it would have been better for me to stay on the main roster and just try to maybe start something. But looking back on it, you know, I wish I would have, right?
Well, I mean,
Sure.
I guess it's like, I guess in hindsight, it's easier to say, right? Like, oh yeah, I
Right.
wish I would have done this or that or that. But at the end of the day, like you make the decisions that feel right for you in the moment. And so no regrets, right? That's all you can do. So,
Right.
Trevor, right now there's been a lot of changes. Oh my God, since you left WWE, there's been so many different changes. Obviously Triple H is definitely, now in charge. I mean,
Yep.
NXT is going to the CW, Raw is going to Netflix. There's just a lot happening. How do you feel about all of the changes that have gone down in the company? How do you feel about now seeing Triple H fully be in charge of the creative, especially since you mentioned that, when Vince was there, he didn't really like the NXT guys. So that was a hurdle for you. But now seeing all of these changes, I can only imagine it might give you, some hope, as you mentioned, maybe returning back to the company.
For sure. Lots of hope, because it's hard to think that the WWE can continue to get bigger, but then you see like this Netflix deal, and then you see like all these things that continue to come out and happen, and you're just like, how does it keep growing, right? And it never feels like there's going to be a time where it stalls out. Like it seems like right now, like it's really just getting started, which is insane to think, because this Netflix thing, it has such potential to explode. Like when you see the numbers that Netflix has, compared to your cable networks. Like it's dramatically more. So the thought that that will always be an option and that they will always be fine, you know what I mean? It's always going to be there is really cool. And if I go there tomorrow or if I go there weeks from now or years from now, it's going to be an even better company than it is today, right? So that is so hopeful and so like reassuring. And it is. It's so cool to see like the guys that were kind of in the same position as me that were like not really getting matches or getting time on TV now get to have more time on TV. Like your Bronson Reed, for instance, who's now in like one of the top angles against Seth Rollins and stuff. And like, yep. So Bronson Reed was in my class, and we started day one together, and then I saw him be released, and then also come back, and now he's being featured in, a main event angle against Seth Rollins, and will be, headlining whatever pay per view that happens at, right? And it's so cool. And then Dexter Lumis, the exact same thing. We started the exact same day together. I watched him be released, and then I watched him come back and now be asserted into an angle that again is huge. And you know what I mean? I hope that happens with me as well, right? And I think that the ability for that to happen is even greater now because of all the changes that continue to make WWE better.
Have you considered, going or putting yourself out there for TNA, for AEW, any of those places?
Yeah, of course. I'd like to work anywhere, you know what I mean? And I don't want that narrative to be that like I only want to wrestle for WWE, right? But I also don't want to just like be the guy that I was in WWE and these other companies, right? Like if I'm going to appear in another company, I want it to be like how I think I deserve to be shown, right? Like I want to come in as a top talent that's going to have a direction. I don't want to just come in just because the money's there, right? So I'm excited to work absolutely anywhere. Like you know what I mean? I showed it with the Maple Leaf. Like they're trying to become something. So if I'm fine with going and working in these smaller indies that, you know what I mean, have lesser numbers than I'm used to, then I'm going to go work at these places too, because at the end of the day, I just want to work, right? And I want to show the abilities that I believe that I have.
Yeah, I feel like, Dan, like that's the way to do it, right? Like you just got to get out there, remind people like this is who I am, this is what I can offer, and this is why I'm worth bringing on to your promotion because of what I can do. Okay, so I do want to go ahead, and this is a question that I ask all of my guests, like right before we wrap things up. But it's short-term, long-term goals. Of course, we're nearing the end of 2024. 2025 is on the horizon, so it's always like, ooh, like feeling like brand new me. Like we're getting re-inspired for all of these goals. What are some of those for you?
To be honest with you, in the past few years of my life, I feel like I've really kind of figured out how to live an enjoyable life. And even though like I was going to work and I was stressed out with not being able to, perform, in my personal life, it was great, right? Like it was the best years of my life. And so going forward, I just want to continue that. I just want to continue to have a great personal life because even though my professional life could drive me crazy, I don't want to carry that over into the personal stuff, right? So I just want to keep that going. So ultimately, my goal for that is just to keep personally getting better because what I've learned in the past few years is the better that I've became personally, the better I've became professionally. They kind of just like carry over, ironically. So really, that's my biggest goal moving forward is that I feel like once I get to an opportunity where I can, showcase those abilities, I will unlock more goals. But I don't want to like put anything out there that's just like, I don't know, too ridiculous. But if I just start with this small goal of just like personally being a better person, then it'll be fine, right?
Yes, no,
Yeah.
I agree with that. I always talk about like the law of attraction. They say positive people attract positive outcomes, positive things. And so I feel like, yeah, it's true. When your professional life is not working out, that bleeds into your personal life. And you're miserable in your personal life, you're gonna be miserable in your professional life, which is just gonna be this constant
Right.
circle. So I feel like you've got to break the cycle and just enjoy things. Like that's it. Like that's what it is. And I think everybody sort of struggles with that at some point. So I'm glad that you've got it figured figured out. And hey, man, I'm really excited to see what you continue to do. I'm rooting for you, man. I hope to see you back in WWE as a viewer. I'm obviously, always watching the show, so I'm definitely rooting to see you return. Trevor, before we wrap things up, please let the people know where they can follow you, where they can support you, where they can check out some of your upcoming events or anything like that.
Right. So you can follow me on Twitter at Trevor Lee Pro. Unfortunately, all I talk about is Ravens football. So you can still follow that if you'd like. On Instagram, I do believe it's also Trevor Lee Pro. I'm terrible at social just stuff in general. So that's really all I have that you can follow. And I try my hardest to put stuff out, but I'm just so bad at doing social media. So if you would like to help me, reach out to me there on booktrevorlee.com. You can hit me up for bookings there. Or if you just want to help me with social media, you can hit me up there. Anything, you can hit me up there. Denise, this was great, and I really appreciate you giving me a platform, to talk and just be able to ramble on for minutes on minutes. But again, I really appreciate it.
No, I love it. You were a great interview, and I think the fans are definitely going to enjoy hearing your insight and your experience and all of that. So thank you so much. Of course, I'm going to post all of the links in the description box below where you guys can follow Trevor and check out everything that he's working on. Thank you so much, Trevor, for taking the time to do this interview. Thank you to everybody watching. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye, everyone.